Chosen one, there are moments in life when your spirit begins to notice what your eyes have overlooked for years. You feel a shift in conversations, a strange silence where honesty should exist, and an invisible weight that tells you something important is being kept from you. This is not about fear or suspicion for its own sake. It is about spiritual discernment awakening within you. When you are chosen, your journey is never ordinary. God allows your awareness to increase because your next season requires wisdom greater than your current understanding. What you are about to recognize could change everything. Chosen one, someone is hiding the truth from you. And the first thing you must understand is that hidden truth rarely announces itself with loud alarms. It comes disguised as incomplete conversations, unusual behavior, delayed answers, and subtle inconsistencies that most people ignore. The spiritual battle is never limited to what your physical eyes can observe. There are moments when God begins revealing what has remained concealed, not because he wants you to become fearful, but because he is preparing you to walk with greater clarity than ever before. You have probably experienced situations where something simply did not feel right. You could not explain it logically. You had no evidence that would satisfy the people around you. Yet your spirit refused to settle. Others dismissed your concerns, telling you that you were imagining things or reading too much into the situation. But deep inside, an unshakable feeling continued growing stronger. That feeling was not always anxiety. Sometimes it was discernment quietly reminding you that appearances can never replace truth. The enemy understands that deception becomes powerful only when it remains unnoticed. That is why confusion is often introduced gradually. Rarely does someone wake up one day and decide to reveal their hidden motives. Instead, they carefully manage what you see while keeping the most important pieces out of your reach. They speak enough to satisfy your questions, but never enough to reveal their true intentions. This pattern repeats until the person being deceived begins accepting partial truths as complete reality. Chosen one, pay close attention to how people respond when simple questions require complicated answers. Truth has a remarkable consistency. It does not need excessive decoration or endless explanations to survive. Lies, however, demand maintenance. They require constant adjustments because every false statement must be protected by another one. When someone repeatedly changes details, avoids direct responses, or redirects conversations away from important subjects, your spirit should become attentive rather than distracted. There is another sign that often goes unnoticed. Watch how certain people react when your confidence begins to grow. Hidden truth becomes uncomfortable for those who benefit from your ignorance. As long as you remain uncertain about your value, your purpose, or your spiritual authority, they feel secure. But the moment God starts strengthening your identity, their behavior begins changing. Encouragement becomes criticism. Celebration becomes silence. Support becomes distance. Not because you have done something wrong, but because your awakening threatens what they hoped would remain hidden. Remember that spiritual deception is not limited to strangers. Sometimes it appears through familiar voices. The people closest to you possess the greatest opportunity, either to strengthen your discernment or to weaken it. This is why Scripture repeatedly emphasizes wisdom, testing every spirit, and seeking understanding instead of blindly accepting every appearance. Familiarity should never replace discernment. Love does not require blindness. Compassion does not demand ignorance. Forgiveness does not eliminate wisdom. Many chosen people struggle because they mistake peacekeeping for spiritual maturity. They convince themselves that asking difficult questions creates unnecessary conflict. They remain silent when God is urging them to seek clarity. Yet, truth is never threatened by honest examination. If someone becomes unusually defensive whenever accountability appears, that reaction often reveals more than their actual words. God has an extraordinary way of exposing what people desperately try to conceal. Sometimes he does it through unexpected conversations. Other times through repeated patterns that become impossible to ignore. Occasionally he reveals hidden truth by allowing circumstances to remove every disguise at precisely the right moment. Timing matters because premature revelation can produce confusion, while divine timing produces understanding. Have you noticed how certain situations keep repeating despite your sincere efforts to change them? The same disappointments, the same broken promises, the same unexplained setbacks involving the same individuals. Repetition is often one of God's methods of gaining your attention. He allows patterns to continue until you stop focusing on isolated events and begin recognizing the larger picture. Chosen one, never underestimate the importance of observing actions over promises. Words are among the easiest gifts anyone can offer. They cost very little. Actions require sacrifice, consistency, and genuine character. Someone hiding the truth may become exceptionally skilled at saying exactly what you hope to hear, while consistently behaving in ways that contradict those promises. Over time, actions reveal what carefully crafted words attempt to conceal. Discernment grows strongest when you spend time in God's presence. The more familiar you become with His voice, the easier it becomes to recognize voices that imitate truth without actually carrying it. Counterfeit messages often sound convincing because they borrow fragments of truth while removing the parts that require accountability. This mixture creates confusion because it feels almost right without ever being completely right. You may wonder why God does not reveal everything immediately. The answer often lies in preparation. Knowledge without maturity can become overwhelming. Revelation without wisdom can lead to impulsive decisions. Before exposing hidden motives around you, God strengthens your inner foundation so that truth becomes something you can carry rather than something that crushes you. Notice how some people seem unusually interested in controlling the information you receive. They decide what you should know, when you should know it, and how you should interpret it. Healthy relationships encourage transparency. Manipulative relationships manage perception. There is an enormous difference between protecting someone's feelings and deliberately controlling their understanding of reality. The chosen often experience seasons where isolation increases unexpectedly. At first, this feels painful because familiar connections begin weakening. Invitations become fewer. Conversations lose their depth. Certain friendships slowly disappear without clear explanation. Yet many times this separation is not punishment, it is protection. God quietly removes distractions so that your spiritual hearing becomes sensitive enough to detect truths that constant noise previously concealed. There are people who recognize your potential long before you recognize it yourself. Surprisingly, not everyone celebrates that discovery. Some become uncomfortable because your future exposes the limitations of their own choices. Rather than encouraging your growth, they attempt to keep you dependent on outdated versions of yourself. Hidden truth often involves concealed intentions rather than concealed facts. Their actions reveal a desire to preserve control instead of supporting your freedom. Chosen one, be careful of excessive flattery without genuine investment. Not everyone who praises you believes in you. Some compliments are designed to lower your guard. They understand that constant affirmation can become a shortcut to influence, but authentic supporters speak truth even when it is uncomfortable because their commitment lies with your growth rather than your approval. Another warning sign appears when someone consistently minimizes your spiritual experiences. Every time God confirms something in your heart, they quickly provide reasons to doubt yourself. Every answered prayer becomes coincidence. Every moment of discernment becomes imagination. Every breakthrough becomes luck instead of divine intervention. Their goal may not always be obvious, but the result remains the same. They slowly disconnect you from trusting the voice God placed within your spirit. One of the greatest mistakes chosen people make is believing that everyone values truth equally. This assumption creates vulnerability because you naturally expect others to operate with the same sincerity that guides your own heart. Yet not every individual measures success by integrity. Some measure success by influence, comfort, or personal advantage. When those priorities dominate, truth becomes negotiable, and honesty becomes secondary to convenience. Pay attention to how people behave when they believe no one important is watching. Character reveals itself most clearly in private moments. Public appearances can be carefully managed, but consistent integrity flows from the heart regardless of the audience. Someone hiding the truth often becomes exhausted trying to maintain multiple versions of themselves because deception requires performance while authenticity requires only honesty. There are seasons when God intentionally slows your progress because rushing forward would place you in environments where hidden deception could cause lasting damage. Delays frustrate the flesh, but they often protect the spirit. What feels like unanswered prayer may actually be divine preservation. Looking back, many chosen people eventually recognize that the opportunities they mourned would have connected them to relationships built upon concealed motives instead of genuine purpose. Sometimes the truth is hidden through silence rather than direct lies. Information is carefully withheld because revealing it would change your decisions. This kind of deception appears polite on the surface. No dramatic arguments, no obvious betrayal, just strategic omissions that shape your understanding without your awareness. That is why discernment must examine not only what is being said, but also what consistently remains unsaid. Chosen one. There comes a point when your spirit begins noticing that silence itself can become a message. You start realizing that what people refuse to address often speaks louder than the conversations they eagerly begin. There are questions that consistently receive delayed responses. There are subjects that instantly change the atmosphere whenever they arise. There are moments when eye contact disappears, voices become uncertain, and confidence suddenly gives way to hesitation. These are not details to obsess over, but they are details to observe. God never asks you to become suspicious of everyone, yet he repeatedly calls you to become wise enough to recognize when something beneath the surface deserves your attention. Wisdom understands that truth has nothing to fear from examination. If someone genuinely desires honesty, they will not be threatened by respectful questions. Instead, they welcome clarity because they know that transparency strengthens trust. But when someone is protecting hidden motives, every sincere question feels like an attack. They may accuse you of overthinking, becoming negative, or creating unnecessary drama. Notice how quickly the conversation shifts away from the issue and toward your character. Suddenly, instead of discussing the truth, you are defending yourself for asking about it. This tactic has been used for generations because distraction is often easier than confession. Chosen one, never allow someone else's discomfort with accountability to convince you that your discernment is the problem. There is a profound difference between judging someone unfairly and paying attention to repeated patterns. God never instructed his people to ignore wisdom in the name of kindness. In fact, throughout Scripture, discernment was treated as a gift that protected his people from unnecessary destruction. The enemy does not fear people who are merely emotional. He fears those whose spiritual eyes remain open while their hearts remain humble. One of the greatest indicators that someone is hiding the truth is inconsistency over time. Anyone can make a mistake. Anyone can forget a detail or communicate poorly on a difficult day. But repeated contradictions create a pattern that deserves careful observation. When today's explanation conflicts with yesterday's story and tomorrow's version changes once again, something deeper is taking place. Lies often require revision because they cannot stand on their own foundation. Truth remains steady because it never needs to remember what it invented. Have you ever noticed that God often gives you small confirmations before revealing larger realities? Perhaps you sensed something unusual months before evidence appeared. Maybe you dismissed the feeling because you wanted to believe the best about someone. Then another situation emerged, followed by another, until the pieces slowly formed a picture you could no longer ignore. This is one of God's mercies. He rarely overwhelms his chosen all at once. Instead, he teaches them to recognize his guidance one step at a time. Chosen one, there is a reason your spirit feels restless around certain environments. Peace is not merely the absence of conflict. True peace is the presence of God's order. You can sit in a perfectly quiet room and still sense deep spiritual unrest because appearances cannot erase what your spirit perceives. Likewise, you can stand in the middle of difficult circumstances while experiencing supernatural peace because God's presence surrounds you. Never confuse external calm with internal confirmation. the two are not always the same. Sometimes hidden truth is protected through carefully created urgency. You are pressured to make decisions quickly before you have time to pray, reflect, or seek wise counsel. Someone insists that everything must happen immediately. They become impatient whenever you ask for time to think. This pressure is intentional because discernment grows stronger in stillness, while manipulation depends upon haste. The enemy loves rushed decisions because they often bypass wisdom in favor of emotion. God's timing frequently frustrates people who depend on deception. They cannot control when he decides to reveal what has remained concealed. They may successfully manage appearances for months or even years, but eventually truth begins finding its own way into the light. Sometimes it happens through unexpected conversations. Sometimes through circumstances completely beyond human control. Other times through the simple fact that maintaining deception becomes too exhausting to continue. Whatever the method, what God determines to uncover cannot remain hidden forever. Chosen one, watch carefully how people respond when others succeed. A person hiding deeper motives often struggles to celebrate blessings that do not directly benefit them. Their congratulations feel empty. Their excitement appears forced. Instead of rejoicing, they quietly compare, compete, or diminish what God is doing in another person's life. Jealousy rarely introduces itself honestly. It often disguises itself as advice, concern, or harmless observation, while slowly attempting to reduce someone else's confidence. Discernment also requires examining your own heart. Sometimes God reveals hidden truth around you by first removing hidden weaknesses within you. If insecurity controls your decisions, deception becomes easier to believe because fear clouds judgment. If desperation leads your choices, manipulation becomes more effective because urgency replaces patience. That is why spiritual growth begins internally before it transforms external relationships. God strengthens your identity so that lies lose the power they once held over your emotions. There are individuals who carefully observe your reactions before revealing their intentions. They test boundaries through small situations. If dishonesty goes unchallenged once, they become bolder the next time. If manipulation succeeds in minor matters, it gradually expands into larger ones. This progression rarely happens overnight. It develops slowly because gradual compromise feels less noticeable than sudden betrayal. The enemy understands that small concessions often prepare the way for significant deception. Chosen one, never underestimate the importance of quiet observation. Not every battle requires immediate confrontation. There are seasons when God instructs you simply to watch, pray, and allow events to unfold naturally. People often reveal more when they believe no one is paying attention. Their words become less guarded. Their priorities become clearer. Their true character begins emerging without effort. Patience often uncovers what force could never reveal. You may wonder why God permits deception to exist at all. The answer is not because he approves of it, but because he allows every heart the opportunity to reveal what it truly contains. Pressure exposes character. Time uncovers motives. Opportunity reveals priorities. Eventually, every person demonstrates what has been living inside them long before anyone else recognized it. God sees the beginning from the end, but he also allows the process to become visible so that his children learn through wisdom instead of assumption. Chosen one, beware of those who constantly gather information about you while revealing very little about themselves. Conversations become one-sided. They ask endless questions, yet every attempt to understand their own life receives vague responses. Information is power, and not everyone collects it for healthy reasons. Some seek knowledge so they can predict your reactions, influence your decisions, or position themselves advantageously. Healthy relationships involve mutual openness, not one-sided investigation. As your discernment increases, you may notice that certain people become uncomfortable around your presence without understanding why. This is not because you are perfect. It is because light naturally exposes what darkness prefers to hide. You may never accuse anyone. You may never confront them directly, yet simply carrying God's peace and wisdom creates an atmosphere where hidden motives struggle to remain comfortable. Conviction often arrives before conversation ever begins. There will be moments when your compassion tempts you to explain away every warning sign. You tell yourself they are simply having a difficult season. You assume stress is responsible for repeated dishonesty. You convince yourself that another chance will solve what countless previous chances could not. Compassion is beautiful, but compassion without discernment can become dangerous. God calls you to love people deeply without surrendering the wisdom He has given you. Chosen one. Another sign to watch for is selective honesty. This occurs when someone willingly shares small truths to gain credibility while carefully concealing the one truth that matters most. They appear to be transparent because they occasionally admit minor faults, yet those admissions become a shield that protects far greater secrets. They know that if they confess something insignificant, people are more likely to assume nothing important remains hidden. But God is never deceived by selective honesty. He sees the whole picture, even when everyone else sees only carefully chosen fragments. Chosen one, this is why your relationship with God must always be stronger than your dependence on human approval. The closer you walk with Him, the less vulnerable you become to confusion. His Spirit begins highlighting details you once overlooked. You stop making excuses for repeated patterns. You stop ignoring the quiet convictions that return again and again. Instead of reacting emotionally, you learn to respond prayerfully. Instead of rushing to conclusions, you wait for God's confirmation. And when that confirmation comes, it carries a peace that fear can never imitate. Never believe that discovering the truth means you have failed. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply seeing clearly after a season of confusion. God does not reveal hidden things to leave you bitter. He reveals them so you can move forward without chains you did not even realize you were carrying. Every revelation is an invitation into greater freedom. Every exposed deception is another obstacle removed from your path toward your calling. There may be people who underestimated what God placed within you. They believed you would never notice the inconsistencies. They assumed your kindness meant weakness. They mistook your patience for blindness, but they did not understand that God was developing your discernment in silence. While they were focused on maintaining appearances, heaven was preparing your spiritual vision. What once seemed confusing now begins making sense. Conversations you could not understand before suddenly become clear. Decisions that once felt uncertain now become obvious because the light of truth has entered places where darkness once ruled. Chosen one, do not seek revenge against those who hid the truth from you. Revenge keeps your attention fixed on the past, while God is calling your eyes toward the future. The greatest response to deception is not becoming consumed by it, but allowing God to transform it into wisdom. Let every lesson strengthen your discernment instead of hardening your heart. Refuse to let betrayal teach you distrust when it can instead teach you dependence upon God. As you continue walking forward, remember that not everyone who leaves your life is a loss. Some departures are divine protection. Some closed doors are answers to prayers you did not yet understand. Some disappointments become the very evidence that God refused to let you build your future on a foundation of hidden motives and concealed intentions. Looking back, you will recognize that His delays, His interruptions, and even His redirections were acts of mercy preparing you for something greater than you could imagine. Chosen one, keep your heart humble, your spirit alert, and your faith anchored in God. Listen carefully when His peace begins to withdraw from a situation. Pay attention when repeated patterns refuse to disappear. Trust the wisdom He has been cultivating within you through every trial, every disappointment, and every unanswered question. The truth does not remain buried forever. What is hidden will eventually be revealed. What is concealed will eventually come into the light, and what God has prepared for you will never require you to live in deception. Walk boldly, because the same God who opened your eyes will also guide your steps, protect your purpose, and lead you into the truth that sets His chosen ones completely free.